I am Dr. Katherine Williams, and you've tuned in to Ask Dr. Kat of Bella VTV. It's officially August, and on every parent's mind, what are we going to do about school? With the ongoing pandemic, many school districts are going virtual or hybrid due to the rising cases in their communities, and thus parents have learned some new vocabulary terms: pandemic pods, microschools, Zutor. Our producer Amanda was asking, what is a Zutor? Learning pods, and so some have looked at homeschooling, some have looked at tutors, I know I have, and even more wondering how are their children with challenging learning needs, such as learning disabilities, ADHD, autism, how are they going to fare in these unusual times? And so we're going to hear tonight what parents are doing and what they can potentially do to get their kids' needs met. And so to that end, I brought together a panel of parents and advocates to discuss these very issues. So let me quickly introduce you. First, we have Ronda Lewis, La Jolla parent with 2 children in private schools, which are offering the hybrid model. Is that right, Ronda? They're both of the private schools are offering the hybrid model?
Well, actually, now they're the same one.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, and it's offering a hybrid. Yeah. So,
okay.
Thank you. Good
Great.
to be here listening.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I'm really curious about that hybrid model and looking forward to hearing more about it shortly. Next, educational attorney, Matt Storey, my good friend and civil rights attorney specializing in special education. And Matt, you have a lot to tell our parents tonight about what options, and some of them might be pretty confusing because what I'm hearing from you is that the district policies vary widely from district to district, even from school to school. And yet at the same time, there's this overlay of the federal law, which is the same no matter where you go. And so we hope that to have you talking to us about what kids with challenging learning needs, what their parents can do.
Well, I'm looking forward to it, Dr. Kat, and thank you very much for having me here. I'm looking forward to seeing what everybody else has to say about how they're dealing with this particular situation.
Thank you. And Megan Trezza, founder and CEO of La Jolla Learning Works, which has pivoted to providing tutoring for learning pods. So you might be having Zutors for us, or be defining Zutors for us shortly, Megan, as well as personalized or concierge-like virtual schools. And Megan, you've been a long-time staple in our coastal Southern California communities, right?
We sure have. Yeah, we're over 11 years out of La Jolla, but now, as Zutors, we're, really going outside of our boundaries to meet the new needs of families and students.
Yeah, you could really be even international in other countries.
The internet's the limit, right?
That's exactly right. I think that's one of the strengths of being on Wi-Fi and the internet is you're not confined in your local communities. And so there's just more options with that. And Alina Mullen, La Jolla parent and founder of EduPod Connect. And I know you're in the early stages of it, but it's a web-based platform for connecting families interested in learning pods. Alina, you're also developing or have developed a learning pod for your particularly young kids, right? You have TK, first and a third grader.
That's right. They're all going to be in the same school, thank goodness, this year. Made my job of creating a EduPod or a learning pod a lot easier for my family and the other families that are joining us. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what other people have done and all the legal surrounding it all too. I want to make sure we're doing the right things, staying on the up and up.
Yeah. And you just introduced another term for us, the EduPod. And finally, Michelle Woodhouse, La Jolla parent with 2 kids, one in public school, and you have one in preschool too. And I know you're really interested in what options are out there for you.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really interested in this time. It's very unique, and I think that there's an opportunity to consider kind of like innovative solutions, but that are very equitable. And I think that's like my biggest concern with the whole learning pod concept. So I'm really interested in learning more about all of it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm also concerned, and I think there's a lot of news articles about that too, with the equity issue that comes up with learning pods. And so I'd love to delve into that a little bit more tonight. So let's go ahead and just open up our talk right away. Straight talk. What are your plans for your kids this fall? Have you decided yet?
Well, we've decided. We wanted to have something solid so we don't have to stress about it anymore. So my family, we decided to hire a teacher who would come in and be basically the teacher's helper for our public schools assigned teachers. So our teacher will be coming in and helping to keep our kids engaged and streamline their learning process a little bit so that they aren't stuck to the screen or stuck to their desk for quite so many hours a day, which was a really, really big pain point, especially for the little ones. They just can't handle it.
Alina, are you having all 3 kids in the same pod?
Yep, all 3 of my kids will be in the same pod. Each of my children will have a learning buddy who will come to our house. So we have 2 that'll be in TK, 2 that'll be in first grade. We have 2 that'll be in second grade too, because one of the TK kids has a second grader who is a brother. So he and his buddy will be there. And then 2 that will be in third grade. And so the challenge is going to be for the teacher to be able to bounce back and forth and have them properly socially distanced, but be able to, keep them close enough to stay engaged together.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of equity, one of the issues there is you do have, I happen to know you as a friend, and you do have a pretty sizable backyard that you can kind of make the spacing fit for them. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to work out pretty well. We are putting in some extra shade options. We'll probably, as the year creeps on, if we're still doing social distancing, we'll probably put in some heat back there for them. And then, thank goodness, it doesn't really rain here so much. So we'll be able to not be disturbed by the weather as much as maybe some in the country, which we feel really, really fortunate about. So, we are really interested too in the equity solution. We, however, don't have anybody outside of our little group in our specific educational pod, but I've been thinking of some options. So when we get to that, I can mention a little bit more.
Right. And then the opposite is Matt, because Matt was just telling me in our pre-production call that he doesn't even know what's going on yet with his kids in really in about 3.5 weeks, right?
That's right. So my wife and I are still completely confused. We've got no direction from our school or district about what they're going to be doing. About a few months ago, we heard they might be doing a hybrid model, but that's been thrown out. And so right now we're just waiting to see what the district has to offer. And so actually advice that you gave me, Kathy, was a few months ago was kind of starting off with the mental health of the house on what we as parents are able to deal with. And so my wife and I have really been trying to figure out a realistic schedule, because I have a son going in third grade and a preschooler, which polar opposite children just in general and in age. And so we were trying to figure out how we can keep the peace in the house and effectively educate and moving on. And I'm very interested to hear about these learning pods.
How about you, Rhonda?
Well, we have a sort of a similar situation. We both our kids now are in private school. We've been here for a year. We just moved my daughter to the same private school as my son. So that's one good thing, but they're very different learners. They're 5th and 7th grade. And my son has ADHD. He's on the autism spectrum. He loves, because there's less sensory input. So he's just thinking this quarantine thing is the bomb. He's like, this is, don't ever go back to school. And my daughter's on the opposite end. She's very social. So now she's going to be in an environment with new students, new school, and she wants to connect. So our school is offering a hybrid model, which sounds good in theory, but on the underneath, okay, you peel back the layers, a little confusing. So essentially they're letting each parent, it's a very small school, less than 150 kids from K through 8th grade. And so they're letting us decide, you can come in some days if you want. They're going to have some classes held outside that you can come and social distance outside, or you can, distance learn from home. So it's almost a situation where there are too many options. And I wonder how the teachers are going to be able to handle that. In theory and on paper, having so many options sounds like a great idea, but we honestly don't know how this is going to work, especially trying to address the different learning needs of both our kids.
And so does it mean you just get to choose from?
You get to choose. Yeah, you get to. They're going to have desks. There's a cap of 14 students per class. There's only one class per grade, so they can you can go if you feel like going to school that day. You can go into the classroom. You can work from home, or you can, some classes will be hosted outside. You can come just for the outside courses and then go home after that. So it's anything. They're letting each family design their own learning situation. So on one hand, that seems like a great idea, but that's kind of, we're hoping that since there's so much flexibility, we can plug our different learning kids into some option that will work. But it's going to be winging it for a while to just kind of figure out what, it's kind of the education platter, pick your, a la carte, pick your style. So for us, that worked the best. Yeah.
It reminds me of going to Baskin Robbins and trying to decide which flavor.
I know. And you end up getting vanilla all the time because it's just too many choices. That's kind of, yeah. So, but we're anticipating them not being able to go back all year. My mom got stuck here. She came to visit, and right before the pandemic started, and when she was getting ready to leave, it was too dangerous to get her back on a plane because she had so many pre-existing conditions. So because of that, we're even more hypersensitive about how the kids are exposed because we have an elderly grandparent in the home. So that makes our decision. We have to be very thoughtful about how much our kids are exposed to the outside world.
For sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's so important. And I share with you, Rhonda, that I'm also new to the community. And I love the fact that I'm like a very user-led kind of person. I love the opportunity to design solutions depending on the needs of everyone. So I could see the challenge between feeling you have too many options, but then also I think that's really great that you have choice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in our family, my daughter who's going to be in second grade in public school, we kind of early on just chose the route of online learning anyway. So even when in San Diego Unified School District, when all the announcements came out, it wasn't a huge impact because I kind of was I had mentally prepared myself for the fact that that could very likely be a possibility for the next academic year. So I kind of had already expected to do that, and we had been working with a tutor who went from being an in-person tutor to a Zutor, so our new term. When we had the kind of shutdown, and I had her work one-on-one with my daughter just to kind of help facilitate doing some of the work, because I'm really fortunate to be able to be with the kids during the day because I have a fully flexible schedule. And so, but I quickly found that learning from mommy doesn't always work. I am not an educator myself, so it was a steep learning curve. So that's why I thought, okay, it would be good to bring someone else in to support the process, and she's a wonderful tutor, and she's been really helpful. And then the other kind of challenge in my family is I have a preschooler, and she has one more year in preschool before she goes to kindergarten. So I wish she could just slide into the TK opportunity, but she missed the deadline. She doesn't have the birthday that falls within that September to December timeframe. So that's my big question personally, is what to do with her, because she was at a preschool and she really enjoyed it, but it's uncertain whether or not they would open, and I don't personally feel comfortable sending her into the preschool in person. So now I'm doing a lot of research and trying to figure out. Sorry, go ahead. What did you say? Oh, so I'm going to figure out what to do. So we're going to hopefully, I'm going to kind of homeschool her, so that's a steep learning curve. So that's why I'm also interested in these learning pods, because perhaps that could be a solution for for my preschooler and possibly my second grader, but I'm on the fence right now.
And Megan, you have young ones too, right?
I do. I have a preschooler also. So she's 3. So fortunately, we're not in a position where, we were really focused on academics for her. We were just getting her socialized and just getting her used to school. This was her first year in school. And so it was really heartbreaking to have her abruptly pulled from her school and her like amazing little classroom community. And but we, like you, Rhonda, also have grandparents here locally, and it's been just a huge blessing that they've been able to help them. They take care of her, so my husband and I can work during the day, a couple days a week, and she loves going to grandma and grandpa's house. So as long as everybody's happy, we're just keeping her out of school to keep my parents safe and minimize that risk. But I know my husband and I were just talking about it tonight, about whether or not we hold her spot, pay minimum tuition to hold her spot in preschool, because we don't know when this will be a situation where it would be safe enough for us to send her back to school. And I know it's such a hard decision on so many fronts.
Yeah, I almost think, with private school, you have to, pay. And we were hesitant because partly you feel like you're paying for something you don't really know what you're going to get. Unlike any other year, you could sort of figure that out. And so we're like, do we sign up? Because we both my son just actually moved to this new school in February, and now my daughter is going to be. So we don't know the school well, so we're kind of taking a leap of faith, But we're also working with one of the teachers of the school who's tutoring my son. So we're going to try to add that layer in as well, just to sort of buffer, because he normally had tutors anyway. And so we have a Zutor that he's working with over the summer, and he's going to continue to work with her to support, because like I said, he has ADHD, so to support him through the learning process, because, he kind of zooms out sometimes on the computer a little bit. He's doing some other things. He's spinning around in his chair. It's
My kids who don't even have ADHD, they're doing that.
I know.
My oldest one has figured out she can turn it off her video, and then she can just like go play with her dolls. I'm like, hey, nope. So we have to have somebody just watching to make sure she doesn't check out.
She's already figured out how to maneuver around. That's awesome.
Oh, stinkers.
Yeah.
And I heard that on another segment that we had, the teachers talking about some of the kids who were video gaming. Certainly I caught one of my kids reading a Kindle that was hidden underneath the laptop. And of course, the few times where my kids missed an entire segment or entire session with the teacher, because either I got the time wrong or we couldn't get in on time or whatever it was, from the spring. And so those are things I know that's forefront of my mind, is how do we address those so that, how do we problem solve now so that I don't have those issues again in the fall. So I know last night when I should have been sleeping, I was looking up Amazon or other websites for, little alarm clocks that, little wristwatches that have an alarm system. So that, they can remind themselves for each of their own, because I have 4 kids and I don't want to be the one reminding them when each of their sessions are. And so how can they themselves figure that out? And I went from thinking of an alarm clock that was installed on a wall so it doesn't get lost or, in the wash, to, that's going to be too confusing, something that they carry with them. But, they're just trying to figure out what those options are.
We did some of that too, Catherine. We took our Alexa and we set different alarms, and it tells the child what the alarm is for even. So they can go, like, there's even one for my daughter to put in her retainer, for goodness sakes.
I love it.
Lena, I'll have to pick your brain on that.
Yeah.
Matt, can you tell us about some of the issues that are arising with kids who have IEPs or special ed or special challenges?
Sure. So right now, I think with kids that have special needs and are on IEPs, it's important to know that the law hasn't changed. And so those kids who have IEPs should still be receiving the services and supports that they would typically have in a normal school year. But obviously, we have to look at what's realistic in light of the circumstances. And so kids can't go into school and teachers can't come into homes. And so that really leaves parents at home being, as we're all talking about with ourselves, being the teacher. And, as you know, Kathy, I work with some pretty extreme behavioral kids, and there's just these situations where that's not going to be possible. And so a lot of my time is spent talking to parents who say there is no possible way that my child, my son or my daughter is going to be able to access distance learning. And so there are certainly, when that situation rises, there are certainly going to be cases, I think I'm going to see at least, where there's going to have to be somebody going into the home, or that student's going to have to be going to some kind of specialized school. But we haven't necessarily ferreted that out within the actual law. And so what I've been telling people is to kind of look at this in two ways, which is look at the services, which are like speech and occupational therapy. Those really should not change at all because, as you know, they can be delivered via the telehealth model, right? But the academic setting, that classroom setting, that's going to be the one that there's a lot of gray area on, and even I'm a little confused. But that said, for those parents who are working with children who just cannot access distance learning, districts are going to have to start getting really creative with how they address those kids and what they do. Thus far, I haven't really seen much. We were talking about it a little bit more in pre-recording. It's that, the majority of what's been taking place right now is not in the state law, or the federal law or the Department of Education. It's all between district administrators and unions. That's what's happening right now. And those contracts haven't been fulfilled. And so in the state, even with general ed kids, there's a certain amount of minutes that they're required to receive per week, right? Per day, actually. And that doesn't have to be in person. And so what's going on right now, and I think San Diego Unified is finished. I think LA Unified is finally finished. The teachers unions are, going back and forth with the administration on how much time that has to be basically via Zoom. And so I think LA Unified nailed it down to about 45 minutes a day, but I'm not super clear on that. And San Diego Unified is still working with that. So there's still a lot of confusion on what the expectations are going to be. Suffice it to say that we still should be seeing a lot of support and very similar support to what kids are getting on their IEPs.
So for kids who have IEPs, what should they do right now? Should we be doing anything? Like, should we be reaching out to our schools yet, or wait until school starts? And, what should we be doing to make sure that our kids get that occupational therapy or that speech and language therapy that they're supposed to be getting?
So I think that the number one thing parents should be doing, and even parents who maybe aren't on IEP, is they should be taking an inventory of what they have in the home to actually facilitate that education. And for those parents who have children on IEPs, it's obviously going to be a little bit more because they're going to have to be doing OT, speech, even mental health in the home. Mm-hmm. And so it's really sitting down and saying, okay, what do I need to actually create an educational environment? Do I have internet? Do I have, a computer? Do I have, the speech technology that I have? And then writing that down and in writing, giving it to the district. So it making sure that the district understands where you're coming from at the beginning. And I think that every parent that has an IEP should immediately be calling an IEP when school starts so that they can have a team meeting, with their special ed teacher, their general ed teacher, and their administrator, those people that are required to be there. They should have that team meeting and get from them exactly how those services are going to be provided so they can actually make a decision. And that's what I would be doing now. You take your inventory and you in email ask for an IEP meeting, because that's going to be really important, because I forget who was mentioning it. This could go on for the entire school year. And so the more prepared you are, the quicker you talk to the school, the better you're going to be able to facilitate all the changes that we're having to deal with.
And really, one of my clients, actually just today, mentioned, it was a new client, and she mentioned that they were just about to ask for an IEP evaluation, but then the pandemic hit. And so what about those kiddos?
So, as long as those assessments can be done via the telehealth model, they should still proceed. And that is just going to depend on the type of assessment. And so, as you know, I've had a lot of opportunity to go around and investigate what types of assessments can pretty much be done. And that's really across the board, almost all of them. There are certain types of mental health and psychological assessments that might be limited. But I would suggest parents continue to move forward with those assessments, because the reality is, a lot of parents were waiting in March and April and May to get those done with the idea that we'd be getting going in August, September, October. That's not going to happen. And so I think it's really important, if the new educational environment is going to be at the home, that we need to get baseline data in the home. And so those assessments should continue to take place as long as they're able to be done so in a legitimate way.
I want to piggyback on that, Matt, because we have been doing our academic skills assessments via Zoom, and it's been going great. We break it up into more chunks and shorter periods of time for the students, but it's gone really smoothly. And I was sitting in on the San Diego Board of Education meeting today, and they were saying just what you were saying, reiterating that they're expecting the, IEP deadlines, timelines to be respected right now, and that they do want to see services, implemented as much as possible over Zoom.
Right. And as you know, Megan, I've sent people your way to specifically have those assessments, because in March and April and May, the schools were just not doing them. And I think that might continue to be a problem. And so that's why, just in my position as an advocate and attorney, I often look to private providers to get these assessments done, because it's a really, really good way to go.
Megan, tell us more about what your company can provide parents. I hear there's virtual tutors or Zutors. Zoom tutors.
I learned that word tonight, so I didn't know we were Zutors until you mentioned it. But yes, we've been Zutors since March, and it was a pretty quick transition for us. I think we kind of headed off the whole transition by about a week to get everything organized. And we've been providing all of our services over Zoom. And, it's gone really smoothly. So we do support students who have specific learning challenges, like, those that Matt has worked with, helping kids that have dyslexia, who have ADHD, providing them with more specialized support, as well as kids who are, traditional learners and just need, more of that mainstream tutoring help. And so, we've seen our students now, increase hours because they need more personal attention, because, as parents, like you said, Michelle, it's really hard to teach your own kid, which I know now even more so from a parent perspective. But that's what I've always heard parents saying coming into my offices. And now, everybody as a parent is in a very unique situation now of having a lot more of that weight on your shoulders to oversee your child's education. So we're doing a lot more of that. And we decided to open up as a virtual private school for grades 1 through 5 for the fall, because we had so many clients who were just expressing to us how their child's needs were not met by the distance learning program that happened in the spring, and that they could not engage online in a classroom of 20 or 30 students, and that, no matter how much time they could have in that group online, it just wouldn't work for their kid to, whether it's to focus or to feel comfortable to share, their ideas, so that they could get the feedback that they need. And so what we put together was a virtual private school program that's highly personalized, that's limited to 10 students at our maximum group size, but we are actually operating as a one-on-one model, and then a semi-private concierge group of 4 to 6 students in a little virtual classroom as well.
How long will the school day be, Megan, as far as those kids that are signing up for that program?
Yeah, so we have a standard model of a 5.5 hour day, which allows for, 4 hours of time online with a teacher, where that would be broken up between independent work, where the students will, have that teacher present to check in with them, but be working independently, and alternating with more direct instruction, as well as having little group, reading and discussion periods, and working into the week and the day different, more intentional one-on-one meetings for the teacher to check in and help with reading and writing, on those more personal needs bases. And, the thing we're kind of tweaking right now is how we might need to adjust that for younger kids, if they can handle a 5.5 hour day. And the other piece of it is we do have a student who's already enrolled with us as a one-to-one, and he has some special needs, ADHD, autism spectrum. And so we are working with him, and it's going to be a 3-hour day because that's what he can handle. And he has an ABA aide who will be with him at his house. So that's, I think, maybe one possible solution, for families who are looking for a way to kind of build their own hybrid model, is where you can have that more health-based support in the house or medical-based support in the house, and then pair that with the virtual or, Zutor kind of model of having somebody who's live and can engage with the child and respond to them, where they're at. But, also having someone there to assist with more of the behavioral needs.
And just to quickly talk about the ABA, the regional center in San Diego provides assessments for those. And if your child meets the requirements or the criteria, then they can provide those services for you. So they fund those services for you. So just a kind of a nod to folks who may not be able to afford a private ABA, which is applied behavioral analysis for kids who have autism. That's another option or resource for you to kind of look up. It's the San Diego Center, Regional Center. So Megan, also wanted to ask you about the virtual pods, because this is interesting. There's so many different options here, and I just love the creativity that each of you have come up with and have considered. And so this would be not a Zutor, but a tutor or a teacher who comes over to someone's outdoor space, and perhaps they might have a learning pod of, for example, 4 kids, and then they would provide, would they be following, for example, the public school education curriculum and providing tutoring, or are they the teacher providing like homeschooling curriculum? Like, how does that work?
So the way that we've designed the model, and it's still going to be, it'll have to be flexible and adapted because we don't know what school's going to look like yet. And it does need to fit with the school curriculum program. So
Okay.
The model that we have would be, an in-person instructor, teacher who's going, to the family house, like you said, and ideally an outdoor space, and being a facilitator to help the students, with what the assignments they're given through their school. And then also supplementing, providing more hands-on activities, implementing breaks, giving them little yoga lessons or whatever they need to have that healthy physical activity as well, not just sitting at a desk. And also then, there's such an art to group management, right? So that I think is that was like my shell shock reality as a brand new teacher, was that teaching isn't about teaching first. It's first about classroom management. And so, having an experienced educator who knows how to, get a group together and have them all on the same page and doing what they're supposed to be doing and being kind and respectful to one another, and, basically just being engaged learners. So that's a priority, is to make sure the kids are all on task and engaged, and then going beyond that to help them then have some, really healthy, social development opportunities with each other in person. So we'll see, when the schools come out with what the day actually looks like, and when we can find out how much, work the school is going to be providing. We're prepared to provide some virtual curriculum to supplement for the families that are doing learning pods with us, so they can actually have the kids doing work outside of the learning pod if they need more, just more curriculum to support their learning needs. And then we'll also have our instructors equipped with, to help with like in-person, writing activities, like the reading discussion groups and art projects, things like that bring learning to life.
And Alina, that's just right up your alley, what you're working on right now.
Yes, exactly. Actually, Megan, that what you've created and the flexibility of what you created is so many of the things that we considered when we were forming our pod, and so let me just back it up. Again, our family is new to La Jolla. We moved from Manhattan and have been here for almost 1 year. And so navigating and looking into all the different options, we didn't even know what all the options are, really. So we looked at some private schools, went and toured. We were lucky enough to be able to fit into one of those tours, kind of laid into it. We looked into, before we had the announcement, are our kids going to be able to go back on campus? That's something that my husband and I actually feel comfortable with, having our kids go back. We don't have anyone who's immunocompromised that lives close to us. My parents live in Minnesota, and my husband's parents live in Northern California, so we don't have a lot of contact with them. So it was really just about trying to find something that is going to keep our kids engaged, because what we had last year involved a lot of parent supervision that is really, really difficult when you are trying to focus on work at the same time. It's so hard to try to keep your children engaged and be on a conference call at the same time or something of that nature, right? So we really took that into account when we were trying to find an option. We thought, oh, maybe this private school would be a great option, but what if the governor shuts down the entire state and says, okay, your private school has to be online too. Everybody has to be distanced. Well, then we would be in the same boat, and we'd be above and beyond what we would be able to provide for our kids with. We wouldn't be able to add an additional, a teacher's helper on top of that. So that was a risk that we didn't want to have to take, because it just wasn't, in the worst case scenario, it wasn't something that we would be able to sustain for the long term, right?
About what's been happening in this pandemic is that we each have to pivot. As soon as you make a choice, you may need to pivot again. Yeah. And so I think
you do have to be flexible for sure. So late nights up worrying, and I thought, oh my gosh, so, I'm not the only one that has some financial concerns. And in fact, there's a lot of families that are definitely in situations that are far more dire than what my family is facing. And what happens to these children whose parents really need the support? How are they going to get the educations that they deserve and be able to have, something that works for their family and relieves some of the stress on the parents and things? So I reached out to a wonderful group of people, and we are collectively brainstorming and mapping out this platform online that will help to have families connect in a way that doesn't have so many of the awkward conversations, because as we know, there are a lot of different families with a lot of different views on what is the proper way to move forward with when in regards to social matters during a pandemic. Do you stay in your house, generally quarantined, or are you okay with just basically following CDC guidelines and local government guidelines? How strict are you needing to be to support your family, right? And there's
like a dating website, Alina.
Yeah, it's a lot like a dating website. So you can toggle on and off different search criteria, right? So we are thinking about geography. Where is it located? We're thinking about these social needs that are so unique to this pandemic. So there's just so many variables, and we want to make that less painful experience when you're trying to reach out to your fellow families, even families that you think that you know. So I talked with a lot of families, single parent families, parents who do not have native English speaking, right? They're not secure in English and feeling quite overwhelmed. People who aren't tech savvy, people who don't have internet access, people who haven't figured out where to get their computer for their kindergartner who's coming in this year yet. There's a lot of concerns that are out there, and we're trying to address a lot of that. We're also trying to...
Yep, Alina.
What was that?
So when will that be up and running?
Well, I cannot promise it, but I think that we should have it up and running for the week of August 31st. So it would be up shortly after you receive your room assignments, and people should be able to utilize this, at least in the beta version in San Diego. I can't say that it's going to go across the nation right away, but at least the beta version for San Diego should hopefully be up by August 31st, and would also allow you to help connect to educators who agree with what your social stance is and who could provide what your needs are as a family, and also connect families who have financial burdens that don't allow them to, wouldn't normally allow them to form a pod or to get a tutor for their child. We're trying to find like angel investors and sponsors and donors to be able to help to supplement or completely sponsor a child's education throughout this journey that we're on. So we're working on it. So wish us luck.
Sounds like a much more organized way with this one-stop shop, you know, we can match up. And I'm thinking of the social media, for example, the Facebook groups that I've been involved in. So there are ones that are called distance learning, parents. There's even like a Scripps Ranch, you know, homeschooling / distance learning. There's a number of, I'd say a myriad of Facebook groups that you can look at. Some of them are geographically based and some are nationwide. But what's so interesting to me is you can really see in when you read other people's questions or what they're doing, you can really get some great ideas of what other people are doing. And then in that sense, sometimes they're able, based on the threads, connect with each other. But it's much more of a kind of a ragtag way of doing it than what you're talking about,
Right.
Alina.
Yeah, we're trying to help it be a little organized. So we think it could be a successful model. And we definitely are continuing to get a lot of information in from parents, educators, principals, school districts, and even legal. So all of this we're hoping to put together in a really thoughtful and concise way so that it'll be super easy for users to be able to function and have that be a valuable tool for them. But we were able to actually create our pod where it's going to cost about $80 per kid per week when we divide the cost between all the families that are in our group. So we're taking the educator's hourly rate for the amount of hours that we're going to have her, and then we're just dividing it by the number of kids, and then you pay per amount per kid to the educator directly. So the educator is really working as a tutor for us on site. We are going to be having her come to our home shortly to have her look and see how she wants our situation to be set up, and make sure that is something that the parents are also comfortable with. So,
and Alina, I just wanted to point out that there are some pods who aren't hiring tutors or educators, but the parents themselves may have different areas of particular specialties. So you might have an engineer or a scientist, an English teacher, so, and then they basically kind of divvy up the days, and the time.
Right. We're really fortunate to be in a community, I think, that has a lot of universities, so some really highly trained parents out there, and I've heard the same thing, and we're actually accounting for that within our platform as well. So that's something that we think that is a really great model for pod education as well. So that's definitely a really great way to go, I think.
Yeah, great. And Rhonda, I just kind of want to go back to I know that you mentioned your child has autism as well as ADHD, and so you're looking at potentially, or having is it a tutor or a Zutor that you're planning on doing?
Well, it's a Zutor because she also is the science teacher at the school. So so she has to be there. So he's been doing online tutoring to sort of fill in the gap of what he's missed, some of those educational foundation gaps, and an hour a day during the week. And so then she'll continue to work with both the kids. But I'm listening to these ideas, and I love the Facebook idea. I felt like we just kind of went with the easiest route. We didn't really think, I didn't have no idea all these options were available. But the learning, that actually sounds more like what we needed, because, well, the school will provide that too. But, we like the option of having them being physically present, for my son, that works well. He's fine with being at home, but I like having the option of being able to go to a place that's sort of like a pseudo school environment, and learn with other peers, because that's important for my daughter. So
we talked about Zutors and tutors and learning pods in Microschools. Is there anything else? I'm just really amazed at the creativity that parents come up with when they need to when a pandemic hits. Is there anything else that we haven't covered? What are some other creative ways or strategies that you guys have thought of or that you've heard of?
I recently read an article today in the BBC. So this isn't about like specific resources, but it's an innovative approach from a school. Because I feel like, a lot of these decisions have been coming out from our school districts, and it's created this like very strange situation for families to suddenly have to solve a problem, right? Like, we need childcare, we need support educating our kids, there's social, emotional, and mental health, and all of this important things, the kind of the full educational package that they get from in-person learning. So now we're like, oh, what do we do, right? And I like that there's a school in San Francisco called Rooftop, and they have taken it upon themselves to do some of the things that I've been hearing tonight, like a new innovative solution. So they're coming up with a school-wide virtual pod. And they're supporting these family-to-family connections, and they're assigning kids in the same class in these smaller cohorts, but they're also looking at ensuring diversity among the pods. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that's really important, and that I like, that like Alina was talking about, having that kind of option where if you don't have the budget, potentially, like, you could get supported through, different ways. So I think that's really important, and I hope that more market solutions like this will be coming out, but also I would like to see more of these kinds of solutions coming from the schools themselves, because I think that this is going to be really important, because I could imagine, unintended consequences around, all of these wonderful pods being formed, let's say in a class, and then, maybe there's going to be very strange, like, socioeconomic, racial, ethnic divides that are going to be really, really clear. And, I think I'm really hoping and encouraging that schools approach this and think about it in a proactive way, and ensure that we're looking at equity and diversity and inclusion, because I think that's something that's going to be so important as we move forward in this kind of like new kind of COVID world.
And on that note, what a great way to end our segment tonight. Thank you so much, Matt Storey, Megan Trezza, Ronda Lewis, Alina Mullen, and Michelle Woodhouse. Are there any final words you'd like to say before we cap our show?
Well, if anybody would like to reach out to me about getting in on that first beta, they can certainly reach out to me via email at Alina Lindquist@gmail.com. It's kind of a mouthful, but ALINALINDQUISTMULLEN@gmail.com. Send me an email that you're interested in edupodconnect.com, and we'll get you on that disbursement list to get on that initial beta.
Thanks, Alina.
And on that note, anyone who's interested in doing something more like a virtual private school model that's very personalized for your child's needs, you can find us at ljlearningworks.com. And we have a contact form, and you can actually book an appointment right there with our program coordinator to learn more about our services. And I'm also running info sessions for the next couple weeks, just about daily. So you can find a link on our events page so you can register and join me for an info session.
Right. And we'll have these also on our post too, of course.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
Rhonda, Matt, any final words you'd like to say?
No, I think this is really helpful. Every time I get together with a group of parents and providers, and they give me 5,000 new solutions to what I'm dealing with in my own house. So after this, I'm going to have another long conversation with my wife. So thank you.
She's going to
Kat,
contact me, cursing my name.
Oh, I don't think anybody's going to curse them. They're going to be like bowing down to you, Dr. Kat. This was really wonderful. It was so great to hear everybody's perspectives and all the different options. It just gives me more food for thought for our beta as well. And also food for thought for what should I be doing exactly for our own educational pod to make sure things stay on the up. So thank you so much, Dr. Kat, for inviting me.
Well, thanks for coming on Ask Dr. Kat. Rhonda?
I was just going to say thank you again. And one of the things that really jumped out at me from all this is trying to plug into some of those social media groups to gather ideas, because if you're new to the area or you have children with different learning needs, you don't know. I have one child on IEP, it's plug in to get help from other parents, because at the end of the day, we're all facing a new situation where we're having to be much more active in our children's education than we normally, we're having to be hands-on much more.
I'm happy to add some of those links also, too.
Thank you.
But thank you so much again for joining Ask Dr. Kat on Learning Pods. Appreciate it so much, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.